The courtroom was supposed to be a place of order, but that morning in Philadelphia, order looked a lot like humiliation. A white cop slapped a black man across the face, right there, in front of everyone, not knowing that man wasn't a janitor. He was the chief judge of the court. And in that single moment, what started as an act of arrogance became the spark that would expose a network of corruption, racism, and power stretching across an entire city. This is the story of the slap that shook American justice. They said justice was blind, but that day in courtroom 4B, everyone saw exactly what it looked like. The slap wasn't just noise, it was truth breaking the silence. And as the echo faded, the city of Philadelphia held its breath, waiting to see what a man like Judge Elijah Brooks would do next. The morning light hit the glass facade of the Philadelphia County Courthouse like a slow burn, bouncing off marble and brass, pouring gold across a place that rarely saw anything holy. Inside, Officer Dylan Kane strutted through the main hallway in full uniform, surrounded by his usual orbit of younger officers. His boots echoed with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. "You should have seen the look on that punk's face," he said, grinning as he mimed the motion of handcuffing someone. Swore he was innocent, cried about his kids. They all do. Must be some online course they take. Tears 101. The group laughed, all except one. Mateo Cruz, the youngest in the squad. His uniform still looked too new, the creases too sharp, like the department hadn't yet worn the hope out of him. Kane slapped his shoulder. "Don't look so soft, rookie. Out here, compassion gets you killed. You'll learn. The dash cams break, the streets lie, but the paperwork," he tapped the side of his head, "that's what wins cases." "Those cameras seem to break a lot around you," Mateo said quietly. Kane stopped walking, smile fading into something colder. "You saying something, Cruz?" The hallway went still. Then Kane chuckled. "Relax, I'm kidding. You're all right, kid. Just remember which side you're on." They reached courtroom 4B, the air heavy with that familiar courthouse cocktail of burnt coffee, perfume, and anxiety. Prosecutor Rebecca Lowell was already there, sorting through files like a surgeon prepping for an operation she didn't want to perform. She'd been at this for years, enough to know when something smelled wrong, but not enough courage yet to say it aloud. "Morning, counselor," Kane said, leaning on the rail between them. "Ready to put another bad guy away?" Rebecca didn't look up. "Let's hope your evidence holds this time." "It always does," he said, smirking. Across the room, a tall black man in a modest gray suit entered quietly, setting down a worn leather briefcase on the defense table. His movements were slow, deliberate, someone who carried calm like armor. His tie was simple, his shoes shined but old. Kane frowned. "Who's that? Maintenance?" Rebecca glanced up. "No, I think he's with the defense." Kane's smirk returned. He walked over, boots heavy on marble. "Hey, janitor," he said, "that table's for real lawyers." The man didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes met Kane's with a patience that felt older than the courthouse itself. "I know exactly where I belong, officer." Kane wasn't used to that kind of tone from someone like him. He stepped closer, voice low and mocking. "You sure about that? Because I don't remember seeing you at the bar exam." Rebecca started to intervene. "Officer Kane, maybe—" "I've got this, counselor." Kane cut her off, keeping his gaze locked. "We've got rules here. Order. You people—" He stopped, but the damage was already done. "Need to respect that." The man, Elijah Brooks, reached into his jacket slowly. Kane's hand twitched toward his belt. "Easy," Elijah said, voice steady. "Just getting my ID." But Kane was already in motion. He grabbed Elijah's shoulder, yanked the briefcase off the table, and sent it crashing to the floor. Papers burst across the tiles like a deck of guilt, a photograph spinning away. A smiling black family, mid-laughter, trapped in a snapshot of peace. Kane sneered. "Pick it up." Elijah crouched, gathering the papers with deliberate calm. The courtroom had gone silent except for the faint squeak of his shoes against marble. Then Kane's voice again, sharper, crueler. "I said pick it up, janitor." Elijah looked up. "Officer, I think you've made a mistake." "I don't make mistakes," Kane said, and before anyone could stop him, he slapped Elijah across the face. The sound cracked through the courtroom like thunder rolling off stone. Rebecca froze. Mateo's stomach dropped. A door swung open at the back of the room. Chief Judge Marion Avery entered, her black robes flowing behind her like a storm cloud that had just found its lightning. "What in God's name is going on here?" Kane straightened, still puffed up. "Maintaining order, Your Honor. That man, Avery said, her voice slicing through him, is Judge Elijah Brooks, the presiding judge for today's docket." For a moment, time seemed to break. Kane's lips moved, but no words came out. His face drained of color. Rebecca's files slipped from her hands. Elijah rose slowly, the red mark on his cheek already fading, his dignity untouched. "Chief Judge Avery," he said evenly, "please, it's all right." "It's not," she said, glaring at Kane. Elijah's voice softened, but the words cut deep. Officer Kane was simply doing what he thought was right. That's the problem, isn't it? Avery looked at him, confused, almost pleading, but Elijah didn't flinch. The silence grew heavy, filled with shame, realization, and something else. Momentum. By noon, the story had already spread beyond the courthouse walls. Cell phone footage leaked online. News stations looped the slap, anchors calling it everything from a misunderstanding to a racial reckoning. The courthouse buzzed like a beehive cracked open, everyone whispering about the officer, the judge, and the slap heard across Philadelphia. But Elijah stayed silent. He finished the docket, walked to his chambers, and closed the door behind him. He stared at his reflection in the window, the skyline shimmering beyond. Somewhere behind him, his clerk whispered, "You're not really going to let that go, are you?" Elijah didn't answer. He just touched the faint bruise on his cheek and smiled, a quiet, dangerous smile that meant something had begun. Outside, the sun slipped behind the skyline, and the courthouse lights flickered on. Tomorrow, everyone would pretend it was business as usual. But nothing about the Philadelphia County Courthouse would ever be usual again. By the time the afternoon lights slid down the courthouse steps and pooled in the street, Philadelphia had already chewed up the clip, captioned it 1,000 ways, and spit it across every feed in the city. News vans stacked along Filbert like dominoes. Commentators spoke in tones that pretended to be balanced and came off like gasoline. Someone slowed the video and looped the slap to a metronome like justice itself was keeping time. Inside, everything looked the same. Same marble, same portraits, same hush. But there was a new pressure in the hallways, a hum like static before a storm. Clerks pretended to shuffle papers that didn't need shuffling. A couple of jurors asked for the bathroom and never came back. A bailiff muttered, "Should have happened years ago," and then stared at the floor as if the stone might snitch. In the press conference room, the union sent out an officer with perfect hair and a face like a warning label. "An unfortunate misunderstanding," he said, as if the slap were a text autocorrect. Officer Kane believed he was maintaining order in a tense environment. "Our officers face abuse daily, verbal and physical. We ask for patience while internal review proceeds." The word patience came out like a threat. In the squad room at the 14th District, Dylan Kane held court. He kept the grin small this time, pencil rolling across his knuckles. "Relax," he told the circle of cops around him. "It's a blip. Judge'll want it quiet. They always want it quiet. He's gonna blink. They always blink." He clinked his pencil like a toast. Mateo Cruz stood at the coffee machine, staring at a pot that had burned to brown tar. He said nothing. He could still see the judge's eyes, the way they stayed level, like he'd seen worse and had decided to outlast it. The quiet in those eyes scared him more than a screaming match ever could. Back in his chambers, Elijah closed the blinds against the camera flashes strobing through the glass. He slid a stack of files across his desk, the weight of them making the wood creak. Case numbers, names, slashes of ink, and fate. His clerk, a thin woman named Shay, who always looked like she was late to a different job, hovered in the doorway. "You're not going home, are you?" she asked. "Eventually," he said, not looking up. "After I'm finished being tired of being surprised." He started with the list he'd been building for months, a quiet ledger no one knew about except him and the nagging voice his father had left behind. Kane Dillon, 68 cases in 5 years as a primary arresting officer, camera malfunctions in 47, minority defendants in 41. Resisted arrest checked like a reflex. He'd seen patterns before, as a civil rights lawyer, as a public defender, as a human. But this grid was a punch in the lungs. He pulled another file. Rivers, Jamal. 19. Senior. First-generation college-bound. Arrested 2 days before graduation. Possession with intent. Kane testified he saw a hand-to-hand by the corner bodega, followed at a distance, observed furtive movements, and, of course, suffered a dash cam malfunction. The motions were denied. The plea was advised. The time was served. Elijah wrote one sentence in his notebook. Truth without courage is paperwork. He buzzed his clerk. "Shay, I need Officer Cruz. Quietly." Cruz, who was in the hallway this morning? That Cruz. Shay stepped out, returned 10 minutes later with Mateo, looking like a kid called to the principal's office for something he didn't do. He stood just inside the door, hat in hand, eyes refusing to land. "You can close it, officer," Elijah said. Mateo did, swallowed. "Your Honor, about this morning." "I'm not here to talk about this morning," Elijah said gently. "I'm here because I think you can help me talk about the last 5 years. Mateo's eyes flicked up. He hesitated, then came closer. "I can't be seen here too long." "We'll be quick," Elijah said, "and honest." Mateo sat. The chair seemed to exhale. He stared at the nameplate on the desk, Chief Judge Elijah Brooks, like it might bite him. "Do you trust internal affairs?" Elijah asked. Mateo almost laughed. "Sir, with all respect, IA is where bad cases go to retire. They'll note it and lose it in a drawer." "You've seen Kane plant evidence." Mateo's silence cracked for half a second. His jaw jumped. "I've seen things." "Say them," Elijah said softly. "Here, they get to be whole." Plastic baggies in his boot shaft. A half-ounce he calls a rainy day in the glove compartment. He palms it like a card trick. The camera dies the second a stop gets loud. Once, he stopped, took a breath. Once, he told me to nudge a suspect's arm so it looked like a swing. "Don't worry," he said. "The report writes itself." "How many officers know?" "Plenty." Some laugh, say it's how real policing gets done. Some just don't want to know. "And you?" Elijah asked. "My dad's a mechanic in North Philly. He told me when I got the badge, 'Mijo, a badge doesn't make you honest. A habit does.' I'm trying," he said. "But when you speak up, you get iced out. No backup on calls, paperwork audited for stupid mistakes, vacation denied, 1,000 paper cuts." "Internal affairs," Elijah said. "Captain Doyle runs IA," Mateo replied, as if reciting the weather. "He and Kane go back. They fish on weekends." Elijah felt a familiar, bitter calm settle in. He'd expected the web. He hadn't expected how quickly it would stop pretending to be a spider and just sit there, fat and glittering in the sun. "Officer Cruz," Elijah said, "if I open this up, it won't be a hearing. It'll be a war. I won't ask you to fight it if you're not ready." Mateo kept staring at his hands. When he lifted his eyes, they were bloodshot and young. "I'm not ready," he said, "but I'm more not ready to keep my mouth shut." Elijah nodded once. "That's enough for now." He walked Mateo to the door. "You have my number," he said quietly. "No texts, paper only. And if anyone asks, we talked about court security after the headline." Mateo ghost smiled. "Yes, Your Honor." When he'd gone, Elijah stood at the window watching the courthouse steps fill with cameras and outrage and people who'd had enough of both. He touched the side of his face. The sting had faded, but the echo was still there, a pulse beneath the skin. Across town, Rebecca Lowell sat in her tiny office at the DA's, a paper cave piled high with files and trophies she'd stopped dusting. She pulled Jamal Rivers' case onto her lap and read it again, line by line, as if the words might rearrange themselves if she stared hard enough. The probable cause made her teeth itch, furtive movements, trained intuition, suspect comportment, the kind of phrases that made juries nod and defense attorneys get migraines. She grabbed her coat, slid the file into her bag, and headed for the elevators. "Where you going?" a colleague asked, not looking up from his screen. "Home visit," she said, and didn't wait for the eye roll. The Rivers apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that used to be something better and now smelled like burned onions and wet cardboard. Denise Rivers answered the door in a house dress and grief, looking at Rebecca like she'd come with both a knife and a bandage. "Ms. Rivers," Rebecca said, offering a hand that felt like a lie. "I'm ADA Lowell. I prosecuted—" "I know who you are," Denise said flatly. She stepped back. "You want coffee? I can't taste it anymore, but I make it." They sat at a small kitchen table with a plastic bowl of fruit no one had touched. The walls held a dozen pictures of Jamal, football stickers on his helmet, an honor roll ribbon, a smile so wide it felt like an accusation. "I came," Rebecca said, "because I was wrong." A sound escaped Denise, half laugh, half sob. "Where were you 2 years ago?" "Drinking the Kool-Aid," Rebecca said, believing the magic words in the reports, looking at numbers instead of people. Denise wiped her eyes with a paper towel. "They took my boy 2 days before graduation. I begged you not to go through with it. I told you he didn't do it. You said the evidence was strong. You ever watch a person stop believing in you in real time? It's a sight." She breathed, shaky. "He writes me from Graterford, calls me Mama like he's 6 again. The corners of his letters are soft from folding. You know what that means? It means he's trying to hold on to something that doesn't cut." Rebecca felt the words like water she didn't deserve. "I'm reviewing every case I touched with Officer Kane," she said, "starting with Jamal's. I can't promise outcomes, but I promise I won't look away." Denise nodded, very small. "Do that. And when you go back to your courthouse, tell them this. I want my son's name cleaned, not just out of the system, out of people's mouths. I want him to walk into a store without a clerk following him with eyes." Rebecca stood to leave. At the door, Denise's voice softened. "You didn't slap that judge," she said, "but you helped slap a lot of boys like him. Don't be the person who only finds a conscience when the camera's on." Rebecca carried those words down 3 flights and all the way back to her office. At the police administration building, Captain Frank Doyle leaned back in his chair with the casual cruelty of a man who knew the weight of secrets. "You step in it this morning," Doyle said. He looked like a janitor, Kane shrugged. "You ever see a janitor carry himself like the bank has his name on it?" Doyle asked, voice soft. "Grow up." "I'll apologize," Kane said mechanically. "We can do one of those statement things. The union." "The union's busy," Doyle cut in. "They're spinning. City Hall's calling. The mayor wants a leash without getting bit. We're going to give him a show. But first, you say nothing to nobody. You hear me? We keep our house tight." Kane bristled. "They're painting me like a racist. For what? Doing my job. The streets don't clean themselves." Doyle smiled with half his mouth. What you are is useful. Don't get confused. Useful things don't talk. This judge, Brooks, he's a true believer. That makes him dangerous. We'll handle it. How? Doyle set a small black body cam on the desk, the lens like a blind eye. New model next month. Sync goes straight to a server we pick. You know what that means? It means truth takes the scenic route. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you're clean as church. That night, Angela found Elijah in the living room of their row house in West Philly, tie off, sleeves rolled, laptop open. You've got the face? She said, sinking into the couch beside him. What face? The one you had when you took on the school district and forgot to sleep for 3 months. If you're asking if I'm humiliated, I'm not. If you're asking if I'm angry, I am, but not about the slap. What then? That he looked at me and saw a custodian for his mess, he said, and that the room let him until a robe walked in. You go after them, they'll come for you, Angela warned. He laced fingers with hers. They already did. Just promise me you won't fight alone, she said. That's not heroic, that's stupid. Define alone, he murmured, and she squeezed his fingers until the word hurt less. Morning came with rain. Like the city needed to cool off. Elijah took the bench with the same calm people kept mistaking for softness. He reassigned himself, no fanfare, to a quiet case nested in his docket, a drug possession charge predicated on Kane's testimony. An easy place to start pulling thread. The courtroom filled with more reporters than usual, drawn by the scent of blood. Elijah ignored them. He read the file. He asked questions no one thought judges asked. He set motions for an evidentiary hearing. No drama, just the steady work of tightening bolts. In the back row, Mateo watched with his shoulders at his ears, cap pulled low. He'd used a different entrance, parked 3 blocks away, turned his phone off. Every time Elijah looked up, Mateo's pen froze, as if the judge might read his fear and mark it inadmissible. Across town, Rebecca met with her boss, District Attorney Henry Calloway, a man who could make good morning sound like an indictment. She pitched, review the Kane cases, start with Rivers, bring in an outside auditor like the Innocence Project. He steepled his fingers. We will not undermine public safety because a cop got spicy with a judge on camera. It's not about a cop being spicy, she said, regretting the word as it left her mouth. It's about systemic misconduct. The stats, he said, are our conviction rate. You want to hand the city to chaos because you got a conscience when the wind changed? I want to stop sending innocent people to prison, she said. He smiled without warmth. Then don't make mistakes. When she didn't flinch, the smile thinned. Drop it, Rebecca. Prep for the Mercer press conference. We will project stability. She left feeling like she'd swallowed a fist, turned right toward the stairs, the file heavier now. That evening, the rain quit. The streets came up glittering under the streetlights, slick with the truth nobody wanted to step in. Elijah stayed late. Shay went home. The courthouse, emptied of day voices, hummed with another kind of sound. Air vents and distant elevators and the ghosts of verdicts. He stood in the gallery alone, looking at the bench where he'd sat all day and the defense table where he'd been slapped. The wood still had a faint scuff where the briefcase hit. Elijah knelt briefly, fingers resting on the spot, not praying, just remembering. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, no caller ID. Judge Brooks. Yes. You don't know how deep it goes, the voice said. Walk away. Why call if I don't matter? A soft chuckle. Because you still think this is about you and a cop. It's not. It's about supply chains, contracts, voters who like their crime graphs pointing down. You pull the wrong thread, whole suits come apart. Then wear better suits, Elijah said. Your family's nice. Be ashamed to see them in the news. The line clicked dead. Elijah texted a single contact, Marion Avery. We need federal eyes, quietly. The response was almost immediate. I'll make the call. By morning, a woman with straight black hair and a folder marked DOJ sat in Elijah's chambers like she'd always been there. Special Agent Rachel Nguyen introduced herself without small talk. Her questions were clean. Her eyes missed nothing. She slid a photo across his desk, a whiteboard with arrows and names. On one side, arrests and asset seizure. On the other, construction contracts. At the center, a knot of names: Doyle, Mercer, Calloway, and a box labeled The Syndicate. Cute name, Elijah said. They picked it, Nguyen replied. I'd have gone with something less on the nose. He told her everything, what he'd seen, what he suspected, who he trusted, which was a very short list. We've been circling your city for 18 months, she said. Couldn't get a clean entry point. If what you're saying is true, if your officer friend will testify, we can build something that doesn't collapse the second we breathe on it. Officer Cruz won't testify, Elijah said. Not yet, but he'll corroborate, and he records. Good, she said, standing. Because the other side isn't waiting. Your cop, Kane, has a partner, Ray Maddox. We subpoenaed him this morning. He vanished at lunch. So we're on the clock. We're on the clock, Nguyen agreed. Don't walk to your car alone. Don't use the same route twice. And Judge, don't be a cowboy. We have enough dead heroes. Around noon, the police union filed a motion in state court to remove Elijah from any case involving Officer Dylan Kane or other members of the department on grounds of judicial bias due to personal affront. The paperwork was slick, the kind of thing a law school would teach, how to weaponize etiquette. Elijah read the motion, smiled without humor, and denied it with a one-page order, citing the canons of judicial ethics and an old case he knew better than his kids' birthdays. He put a copy on the public docket. Transparency is the balm, he told Shay. For them or for you, she asked. Late afternoon, Mateo texted from a burner he'd bought off a kid on Market. Got audio, can't send. Where? Elijah replied with a cross street and the name of a church no one attended on weekdays. They met in the shadow of a stone angel whose face had eroded into something like forgiveness. Mateo passed him a flash drive so small it felt like an insult. They were bragging, Mateo said, voice low. Maddox, Doyle, Commissioner Mercer. The arrangement. Which neighborhoods to hit for numbers. Which judges to shop. Which prosecutors will wave it through. If anybody asks, it's proactive policing. Elijah tucked the drive into his inner pocket the way his father had taught him to carry cash. Close to the heart, closer than fear. You did well, he said. Go home a different way. And if your gut says run, run. Back in chambers, Nguyen was waiting, as if she'd been hiding in the wall. They listened. The voices were grainy, the laughter worse than the words. You could hear the clink of ice in glasses. You could hear the ease of men who figured the world was a wallet they'd already opened. Jesus, Nguyen breathed. This is enough to start a grand jury, and not the friendly kind. Start it, Elijah said. Slow, she countered. Clean, no leaks. He nodded. Same page. 2 different books, maybe, but the same page. That night, while Nguyen filed paperwork no one saw, and Elijah drafted orders that would look procedural to anyone who wasn't paying attention, and Rebecca sat in her car outside the DA's office wondering how you resign from a job by telling the truth too loudly, the city exhaled a tired breath. On a block off Broad, a kid bounced a basketball in time with a siren and didn't flinch. In a cell at Graterford, Jamal Rivers folded his mother's latest letter into smaller squares, tucking it beneath a thin mattress like a talisman. In a South Philly bar, Kane ordered a whiskey he didn't taste, and Maddox didn't show. Elijah finally shut his office door when the clock hit a number that made Angela worry. He took the back stairs, the alley exit, crossed to the garage with his head down. At his windshield, a piece of paper tucked beneath the wiper. No envelope, no signature, just block letters. In a steady hand, "We see you." He stood in the damp garage, paper soft in his fist, and felt the oldest thing he knew rise up in him. A familiar, quiet, flinty thing that had outlived slaps and slurs and long nights and longer cases. He slid the note into his pocket as if he were filing it. On his drive home, the wipers dragged rain across the glass like tired fingers. Talk radio was already pivoting from outrage to sports. At a stoplight, a woman in a SEPTA jacket stepped off the curb, looked at his face, looked again, and lifted a hand in something like a blessing. He lifted his back. Angela was waiting on the porch. The porch light threw a circle around her like a spell. "You're late," she said. "I'm right on time," he said. And for the first time all day, it felt true. In bed, staring at the ceiling, he let the days of the past week spool by. The slap, the silence, the cracks opening where the light could get in. He thought of Denise Rivers' kitchen, of Rebecca's pinched mouth, of Nguyen's steady hands, of Mateo's half-whispered courage. He thought of the syndicate, the men who believed the city belonged to them the way a hunter believes the field is a rumor without the deer. He closed his eyes and slept like someone who'd finally chosen his side in a fight that had been waiting for him since before he was born. And in the morning, no trumpet, no drum, just coffee and a suit and a quiet elevator ride and a hallway that tried to pretend it wasn't watching him. He stepped into courtroom 4B, took his seat, and said, "Good morning," in a voice that made the room stand a little straighter. The lawyers rose. The clerks looked down. Somewhere in the back, a young cop took a breath that sounded like a decision. The docket began. The city leaned in. The storm crawled closer. By the time the clerk called the first case and the microphones outside found other mouths to hover over, the benches in 4B had already filled with people who had no official business being there. Secretaries who took a long coffee break and never came back. Off-duty officers standing with their arms crossed and their faces set in a kind of careful boredom. Reporters pretending to check their notifications while recording everything. A couple of law students in thrift store suits sat in the last row, whispering precedents like prayers. Elijah took the bench, robe crisp, jaw easy. He didn't look like a man planning to set the room on fire. He looked like a man planning to fix a leak. "Good morning," he said, and the courtroom rose like they meant it. On the left, Jordan Pierce angled into the defense chair with the lazy grace of someone who could fall asleep on a roller coaster. He put his battered briefcase on the table, tapped the lid twice, and shot a quick look toward the gallery as if counting allies. On the right, ADA Rebecca Lowell organized her stacks into perfectly squared towers. She kept her expression neutral, but her pen tip clicked twice. Guilty little tells of nerves she usually kept hidden. The defendant, Andre Winston, a 30-year-old line cook with forearms like rolling pins and a face that made you want to talk about anything but prison, sat between them, eyes flicking to the door every time it opened. His mother was in the second row, clutching a church fan even though the air was cool. Elijah glanced over the docket, then spoke low enough to force the room to lean forward. Commonwealth v. Winston. Motion hearing on defendant's suppression petition and related matters. Appearances? Jordan Pierce for Mr. Winston, Your Honor. ADA Rebecca Lowell for the Commonwealth. Thank you, Elijah said. We'll begin with the dash cam issue. It was like tossing a match into dry grass. A ripple moved through the courtroom, rustle of clothes, soft coughs, a camera lens clicking to focus. Somewhere a shoe tapped a fast, nervous beat against the floor. Lowell stood. Your Honor, the Commonwealth contends the dash cam malfunction is unfortunate but immaterial. Officer Kane made contemporaneous notes. His body mic captured portions of the stop, and his testimony. We'll hear from the officer, Elijah said mildly. Bailiff, please bring in Officer Dylan Kane. The side door opened and Kane walked in with the same stride he'd used in 1,000 hallways that bent for him. The uniform looked tighter today. His jaw worked once as he took the stand. He didn't look at Elijah. He looked at the seal above Elijah's head, as if to make the conversation impersonal. Raise your right hand, the clerk said. Kane raised it. The oath sat between them like a blade. You may proceed, Ms. Lowell, Elijah said. Lowell walked through the basics like she was navigating a minefield she'd mapped the night before. Officer Kane, on the night of March 11th, did you observe the defendant commit a traffic violation? Yes, failing to signal. And after initiating the stop, what occurred? Strong odor of marijuana. Suspect was evasive. In plain view, a baggie. Let's pause there, Elijah said, voice soft but carrying. Officer, was your dash camera functioning? No, Your Honor. Technical failure. How many times in the past 5 years has your dash camera malfunctioned during a stop that resulted in an arrest or search? Objection. Relevance. Lowell snapped, quicker than breath. Overruled, Elijah said without looking at her. Answer the question, officer. Kane's smile was surgical. I don't keep count. Equipment fails. That's life. Elijah nodded toward the bailiff, who brought a thin box of paper to the bench like an offering. Time 300 melons. He slid the top file forward. Let me help with your memory. According to departmental logs and the court's own video retention requests, you reported dash cam failure in 68 incidents over 5 years. A low gasp rolled around the room. Andre Winston's mother closed her eyes, a prayer moving across her lips without sound. Elijah tapped the stack. 47 of those incidents involved black defendants. 6 involved Latino defendants. 3 involved white defendants. The rest were unreported. Statistically unusual. Would you agree? Kane tilted his head. Your Honor, I don't do math on the street. I do safety. Safety, Elijah repeated, as if tasting the word. And your body camera? Malfunctioned the same night, Kane said smoothly. Same as the dash cam. Lowell swallowed. Her notes blurred for a half second, then snapped back into focus. She glanced at Elijah. He gave her nothing. Pierce stood slowly, like a curtain rising. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Defense Exhibit A. He held up a flash drive no bigger than a thumbnail. Video pulled from Tino's Deli across from the stop. Owner's name is Valentino Arcuri. Camera points toward the street. We subpoenaed it yesterday. Lowell didn't object. She didn't move. Her pen stopped its nervous clicking as if it, too, were holding its breath. Elijah nodded. Let's see it. The screen on the far wall came alive with the pale wash of streetlights. The angle was bad. The truth wasn't. A sedan pulled over to the curb. Kane's cruiser slid in behind it. Timestamps ran along the bottom, unforgiving numbers keeping their own kind of faith. Kane approached the driver's side window. A beat. The driver, Andre, stepped out, hands visible, posture careful. Kane gestured for him to turn around. He patted him down roughly, then moved him toward the curb. The audio on the deli cam was trash. All rumble and ghost voices. The picture was clear. Kane circled to the passenger side, reached into his own pocket, and palmed a small bag. The motion was quick, practiced. He leaned into the car, came out with the same bag pinched between 2 fingers like a magician revealing a coin that had been behind your ear the whole time. The courtroom sound wasn't a gasp this time. It was a noise deeper than that, like air leaving a room. Lowell's hand flew to her mouth. She pressed it there as if she could keep time from moving forward if she held hard enough. Pierce kept his eyes on the screen, as if he'd seen it all before and still couldn't believe seeing it again. Elijah didn't move. When the clip ended, he let the silence sit. Then he leaned forward, voice almost a whisper. Officer Kane, did we just watch you plant evidence? No, Your Honor, Kane said. The angle, This video could be misleading. Misleading, Elijah said. So your hand going into your pocket, then into the passenger compartment, then returning with the baggie you claim to have seen in plain view, that's editing? Could be a reflection, Kane said. Light's funny at night. You're right about that, Elijah said quietly. It shows things you thought were hidden. Lowell cleared her throat, found her voice, and stood. Your Honor, the Commonwealth moves to suspend further reliance on Officer Kane's testimony pending internal review and requests a continuance. Denied, Elijah said gently. We're not going to pause truth for convenience. He turned to Pierce. Motion to suppress is granted. All evidence arising from the stop is excluded. The charges against Mr. Winston are dismissed with prejudice. Andre Winston didn't move for a moment, as if the words were in a language that would only arrive slowly. Then his shoulders dropped an inch, and his mother let out a noise that was both a laugh and the end of a scream. Elijah faced the court reporter, his tone now purely administrative, businesslike, devastating. Direct the clerk to transmit this record, the video, and the list of Officer Kane's reported camera malfunctions to the Conviction Integrity Unit and to Internal Affairs. Additionally, I am ordering a comprehensive audit of every case in which Officer Kane's testimony was material to probable cause or conviction in the past 5 years. All defendants in custody on such cases are to be calendared for immediate status review. Your Honor, Lowell said, shakier now, the DA's office will cooperate fully with the audit. She looked at Andre's mother. Ma'am, I'm sorry. The words were small, but real. The room turned toward her. Not with forgiveness, not yet, but with a little less heat. Kane's lawyer, Union Counsel David Sterling, his suit worth more than a patrol car's tires, stood from the second row where he'd been lying in wait. Your Honor, we object to the court's... Elijah lifted a hand. Counsel, your standing is limited. Your client is a witness, not a party. He turned to the bailiff. Please ask Captain Frank Doyle to join us. He should be in the building if Internal Affairs is monitoring cases with this level of public attention. That got a laugh in places it wasn't supposed to. A minute later, the side door opened again, and Doyle came in with the rolling calm of a man who knew where the cameras were. His eyes were already rehearsing contrition. Captain, Elijah said, we have a video that appears to show Officer Kane fabricating probable cause and a statistical pattern that raises profound questions about his conduct. What immediate steps will Internal Affairs take? We take any allegation of misconduct seriously, Your Honor. We'll open an investigation, Doyle said. How quickly? Elijah asked. As fast as resources allow. Today, Elijah said, the softness leaving his voice like someone set it down for a second. Resources will allow today. Doyle's mouth tightened. With respect, Your Honor, you don't direct internal police investigations. With respect, Elijah replied, I direct justice in this room. And right now, justice requires that any officer whose credibility is in question not be patrolling our streets. He looked at the bailiff. Officer Kane is to be remanded to custody on suspicion of perjury, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. He is not to be released pending arraignment without a hearing before this court. The gallery erupted, some in approval, some in outrage, most in a collective exhale of finally. The off-duty cops' bored masks cracked, replaced by stiff anger or frightened stillness. A reporter half stood in disbelief and then remembered where he was and sat back down hard. Kane surged to his feet, then caught himself. You can't do this. This is politics. This, Elijah said, is the law. Two deputies approached. Kane looked at Doyle, who gave him the smallest shrug, a promise deferred. Kane put his hands behind his back with the rigid grace of a man performing for a camera, which he was. The cuffs clicked. He flinched, just once. As they led him past counsel tables, he stopped in front of Elijah's bench. For a second, His eyes met the judge's. No sneer now, no swagger. Something like calculation. Something like hate. "This isn't over," he said under his breath. "I know," Elijah replied, and he did. The door banged behind them. The sound bounced off the marble like a closing argument. "Mr. Winston," Elijah said, "you are free to go." "Ms. Winston," he nodded toward the mother, who had begun to cry in careful, quiet sobs. "Your son's record in this case will be expunged as of close of business. Please see the clerk." Andre looked at Pierce as if to confirm reality. Pierce grinned sideways. "Told you the deli man was about to be your patron saint." Lowell gathered her files, hands steadying as purpose replaced panic. She walked to Pierce. "Send me your list. Every Kane case you're holding. I'll send mine. We'll start tonight." Pierce studied her a beat, surprised, then nodded. "We play on the same team now, counselor. Weird, right?" "Don't get used to it," she said, but the corner of her mouth softened. When court recessed, the doors opened and the hallway swallowed everyone, and the building's old bones felt that strange thing buildings feel when they realize they are not just places where things happen. They are the things that happened. On the steps outside, the crowd had grown from curious to biblical. Cell phones glowed like fireflies. A chant lifted, halting at first, then finding its rhythm, settling into a single word that felt like a muscle unclenching. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" A news anchor in a blue suit shoved a mic toward anyone with a face. "Historic day," he said into the camera, voice pitched high with adrenaline. "A Philadelphia judge has—" He stopped mid-sentence as the doors opened and deputies pushed through with Kane between them. The chant skipped, then roared. Someone threw a question, "Do you regret it?" And someone else threw a look, and the whole staircase tilted toward the future. Back inside, in a hallway that smelled like lemon cleaner and nerves, Captain Doyle paced while barking into his phone. "We contain, we isolate. He's one cop with bad optics," he said. He listened, jaw tightening. "We don't say that phrase again, ever. We say we welcome oversight and we believe in accountability. We do not say arrangement on a line that isn't dead." He hung up and looked up to find Special Agent, level moderate, Rachel Nguyen, leaning against the wall like part of the architecture. "You look busy, Captain," she said easily. "Feds," he said, not hiding the distaste. "You people always show up when there's a camera." "We show up when there's a crime," Nguyen said. "Different C-word." He smiled blandly. "You'll find we're fully cooperative." "I'm sure I will," she replied, eyes flicking to the stairwell where Kane had just disappeared. "Looks like your house needs cleaning." "We have janitors," Doyle said. "We have subpoenas," Nguyen said, and the smile moved to her eyes. In chambers, Elijah sat alone for a moment after the clerk cleared his calendar at his nod. He didn't savor. He didn't gloat. He pinned the feeling with a straight pin and set it in a drawer. Then he called Chief Judge Marion Avery. "It's begun," he said. "I'm watching the feed," Marion replied. "You kept your voice calm." "Good. Calm scares them more. You ready for the blowback?" "I was born in the blowback," he said. "Send me a better helmet." She chuckled, then sobered. "Be careful, Elijah." "I will." He set the phone down and stared at the stack of files. Rivers, Jamal, Mitchell, Andre, Gutierrez, Lila. Names that had become numbers and now, maybe, could return to being names. He reached for the next motion, the next case, the next problem to solve with a sentence. The city outside kept yelling and then singing and then going back to yelling. A group of teenagers lit sparklers even though the sun was still up. A woman in scrubs rocked on her heels and cried and then laughed and cried again. Somewhere a cop who didn't know where to put his hands, put them in his pockets and stared at the sky like it had an answer. At the DA's office, Calloway watched the clip on mute, his jaw grinding a rhythm. "Lowell," he said to no one, "what are you doing?" He texted Commissioner Mercer, "We need to talk tonight." On a different floor in a different building, David Sterling phoned someone with a blocked number and a voice that sounded like an empty church. "He went for the jugular," Sterling said. "Brooks, he forced the arrest. If we don't get ahead of this, your people are next." The church voice sighed. "We always knew he'd be trouble. True believers don't trade, they burn." "Then douse him," Sterling said, "before he makes a habit of it." Back at Tino's Deli, Valentino wiped down the counter for the third time and looked at the sticker he'd put under the register a decade ago. No checks, no credit, no nonsense. He muttered to himself, maybe nonsense got the message. Night fell. Philadelphia's kind of night, noisy and humming and a little out of tune, and the courthouse finally pushed out its last stragglers. Elijah stepped into the corridor and found Mateo Cruz leaning against a column like he'd been nailed there. "You shouldn't be here," Elijah said. "I know," Mateo said. I had to see. You did that." "We did that," Elijah corrected. "You brought me the sound. Pierce brought me the picture. Lowell brought me the spine at the last minute. It takes a village to stop a lie." Mateo looked at the floor, then up. "They're going to come for you harder now." "They were already coming," Elijah said. "Now they'll have to hurry." "You don't get tired, do you?" Mateo asked with a cracked, tired grin. "All the time," Elijah said. "I just learned to walk with it." He watched the young cop leave by the side door, hands in his pockets, head down, 1,000 thoughts crowding his shoulders. He imagined the conversation Mateo would have with himself on the drive home, the one where he promised to keep going and then yelled at the windshield because promises are easier in daylight. Outside, the chant had softened into conversations, then plans. Flyers were being made, numbers were being exchanged. Someone was explaining the difference between a complaint and an affidavit. Someone else was showing where on the department website you could request body cam footage, how to spell the word malfunction when you wrote to the city. The syndicate's phone tree lit up across town, lawyers dialing officials, officials dialing cops, cops dialing favors. Already the story was being rewritten in certain rooms. Rogue officer, isolated incident, overzealous judge, biased court. Already the machine was grinding its teeth and spitting out talking points. But in 4B, the wooden plaque above the bench, "In God We Trust," looked the same as it had at 9 in the morning. The difference was the air. It felt clearer. It felt like a room that had remembered why it was built. Elijah flicked off the courtroom lights and stood for a second in the doorway, the room behind him dark but not empty. He thought of his father pushing a mop down a high school hallway, whistle around his neck telling him, "You don't gotta shine for them, Eli. You gotta shine because the floor deserves it." He locked the door and stepped into the hall where the last of the day's voices echoed toward the exits. Somewhere down the corridor, a radio played Al Green too quietly. Somewhere up the stairwell, a pair of shoes clacked too fast. On level moderate, Market Street, the city's neon blinked and then steadied, and someone somewhere whispered the thing you say at the beginning of a war and the end of an illusion. This is bigger than we thought. By evening, the courthouse had cooled, but the city hadn't. The protest outside thinned into clusters, families hugging, public defenders swapping lists, kids holding signs they'd colored at the kitchen table. But the hum didn't stop. It moved, changed shape, slid into living rooms and squad cars and corner bars. Phones kept buzzing with the video from 4B, that deli cam angle replayed until the whole city knew where the light had landed and what it showed. Elijah sat in chambers with the shades half down, the desk lamp floating a warm circle over file folders spread like a map. His tie was loose, robe hung on the stand like a tired sentinel. He'd just initialed a batch of emergency review orders when his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "You don't know how deep it goes. Walk away." He stared at it long enough to feel nothing, then screenshotted it, forwarded it to court security and to Marion Avery with the caption, "And so it begins." The blinds rattled with a sudden cheap wind. Somewhere in the building, a vacuum cleaner whined, cut off, then resumed. The end-of-day song of people who made places function while other people claimed credit for it. He stood, stretched, and opened the door to the outer office. His assistant, Kira, looked up from her screen. "You haven't eaten," she said. "Late lunch," he lied. She pointed to a paper bag. "Tino sent cheesesteaks. He said you made his camera famous." Elijah smiled. "Tell him the camera made the truth famous." He glanced at the clock. "I have a visitor coming." "You mean the agent waiting in the hall pretending she's bad at pretending?" In the corridor, a woman in a navy suit leaned against the wainscoting, arms folded, eyes cataloging his face without being rude. She straightened, offered a card. Special Agent Rachel Nguyen, Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Judge Brooks, mind if we talk? Off the record, where possible, on it, where necessary." "My favorite jurisdiction," Elijah said, waving her in. They sat. She didn't waste the kind of time you spend making friends. "We've been looking at your department for a year," Nguyen said. "Asset forfeiture patterns, contract awards, OT spikes pegged to drug task force hours. It was smoke. Today you gave us flame." "Your timing is interesting," Elijah said. "We were 2 steps from filing a RICO theory without you." She nodded, took it without flinching. "You still might. If we're right, this isn't just Kane. It's a structure. Police brass, union money, city contracts. People who don't share church pews share vendors." "Then we're talking about more than malfunctions." "We're talking about the syndicate," Nguyen said, voice flat, like naming a disease you can finally treat. "We didn't pick the nickname. They did. Because why be subtle when you've gotten away with it for a decade?" "You have names." She slid a thin packet across the desk. "Some. Captain Frank Doyle curates cases, assigns them to officers who won't ask questions. Commissioner Alan Mercer, press conferences in, paper trails out. His brother-in-law's paving company gets every emergency street contract. District Attorney Henry Calloway, disclosures are clean, lunches aren't. Phone tolls like spiderwebs. Shell LLCs with bland names. Photos of men in cheap smiles and expensive suits under a banner that read, Community Partnership. Elijah recognized the room, City Hall's second floor rotunda. He recognized the posture, men who enjoyed thinking they were inevitable. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "A spine, which you have," Nguyen said. "Quiet orders to keep files from getting misplaced before we can copy them. And a warning, if they think they're losing the story, they'll come for you loudly." "We're already at loudly," he said, nodding toward the phone. "Then you'll love the next track," she said. "The union will move for your recusal. Injunction to freeze Kane reviews. They'll try to pull you off the field." "We'll answer with evidence," Elijah said. "We'll answer with light." She stood. "My team is across the street. If you get anything that smells like smoke, call me. We'll bring water. And Judge, this isn't a TV season. It doesn't end neat. Keep your family close." When she left, the office felt too quiet. He texted Angela, "Home by 10, lock the side door, leave the porch light on, love you." The reply came fast. "Porch light's already on. I made too much gumbo. Come home hungry." He looked at a photo on the shelf, Angela and the kids at the shore, hair wild with salt, eyes squinting into a future that didn't feel like a battlefield, and let himself breathe once. Then he dialed Mateo Cruz. "Judge," the rookie answered over engine noise. "Where are you?" "Patrol, Kensington, corner of Allegheny, and amber lights forever." "You ever hear Doyle, or anyone, use the phrase the arrangement?" Silence, just long enough to mean yes. "Don't say it on this line," Elijah said softly. "Say it to this." He opened a drawer, set a small digital recorder on the desk. Words spilled. "I've been recording for months, off duty. Ray Maddox, Kane's partner, bragged Doyle tells him which judges understand the streets and which prosecutors don't make waves. Stats are trophies, not lives. Where's Maddox now? Gone. Supposed to testify tomorrow. Called in sick. Landlord says he moved. Lockers cleared. Don't do anything stupid, Elijah said gently. Stupid gets you dead and makes you a cautionary tale in trainings I don't want to attend. I'm not brave enough to be stupid, Mateo breathed. I'll swing by later. Park around the block. The building settled. Old lungs at night. A knock. Rebecca Lowell. Different now. Like someone stole the script she'd rehearsed 10 years and left her with her real voice. I told Denise Rivers we're moving to vacate Jamal's conviction, she said. She didn't hug me, didn't throw me out, poured tea strong enough to burn a hole in the floor. She set a file down. 23 more like him on my docket, Kane or Maddox as primary affiants. If I move fast, I can stop harm before it multiplies, but Calloway is about to slam the brakes. Because his job is conviction rates, Elijah said, and yours just became the truth. I'm in, she said, no matter how ugly, even if it takes my career. Welcome to the side with fewer Christmas cards, he said. Another knock, the bailiff, face pinched. A manila envelope. Inside, a photo of Angela at the mailbox, late afternoon light turning her hair the color of brandy. A note in block letters, nice house, nice family. Keep it that way. No fear, just clarity ringing high in his ears. He scanned the photo, texted it to Nguyen, dialed home. I'm fine, Angela said first. Agents are in the driveway. Kids are doing homework like we're normal. We are normal, he said. Just normal plus a federal perimeter. Bring dessert, she laughed. These agents judge boxed cookies. Morning brought paperwork and a punch. A courier with a motion the thickness of a novella. Petition to recuse Judge Elijah Brooks from all matters involving the Philadelphia Police Department, and a press release that hit inboxes before the ink dried. Appearance of bias, judicial decorum, hostile environment, optics over evidence, the way power likes its arguments, blurry. Elijah scheduled it for the afternoon, and meanwhile called the morning docket like the building hadn't been repainted in gasoline. One motion to suppress, granted. One continuance, denied. An order to preserve dashcam metalogs, signed. A recess that tasted like adrenaline. In the hall, a journalist asked if he could be impartial. Impartiality is not indifference, he said. It is the commitment to treat truth and lies differently. The recusal hearing packed 4B. Union lawyers hedged the aisle. David Sterling with a binder big enough to hide in. Calloway 3 rows back. Mercer flanked by lab-grown aides. Council members with sunglasses like crowns. Sterling sighed on cue. When a judge becomes the story, justice suffers. Pierce rose for the defense bar. Justice suffers when cops plant dope and call it policing, and lawyers mouth breathe about optics while their clients torch the Constitution like a marshmallow. Counsel, Elijah warned. Withdrawn, Pierce said, not moving an inch. Recusal isn't, are people mad? It's, can the judge fairly evaluate evidence? They're not afraid of bias. They're afraid of a backbone. Sterling spun the deli video as ambiguous 68 malfunctions as statistical noise, the arrest as an unfortunate misunderstanding between 2 public servants. Elijah let him finish and ruled. Petition denied. My obligation is to be fair, not silent. Evidence will be met with action. Appeal if you must. Meanwhile, this court will continue separating what happened from what people wish had happened. Outside, the narrative machine revved. Level moderate, Mercer held flags and said, witch hunts. Calloway said prudence and meant delay. Sterling fed talk radio mob justice and anti-police bias. Nguyen didn't. She served warrants on IA, pulled bank records from contractors with too many new trucks, called a grand jury, and leaked nothing. An emergency motion landed from downtown, a temporary restraining order to freeze reviews pending clarification of judicial bias. Elijah read it twice, set it aside. It would be answered, not at the cost of breathing. The afternoon calendar was ordinary harm. A missed bus dressed as a probation violation, a landlord-tenant spillover short on compassion, a young woman charged with assaulting an officer who had shoved her first. He watched the traffic cam, saw the hunch of her shoulders before the swing, and dismissed, with a quiet that sounded like dignity limping. In the corridor, Mercer waited with a handler's smile. "There's a way to make this less disruptive," he offered. "We'll expand training, fast-track reforms. You stop grandstanding, we keep the city steady." Elijah glanced at manicured hands, nails clean of the city's ink. "I don't want wallpaper reforms. I want rot dug out with both hands." "Careful, the city needs stability." "No, the city needs truth. Stability comes after." The phone vibrated. Unknown number, amused. "Judge Brooks, the fall is longer from where you're standing. Maple Street, Blue Door, charming, chalk drawings. It would be a shame." He hung up, texted Nguyen one word, escalated. 6 words back, "Agents already en route, don't go alone." He didn't. He drove home, bracketed by black SUVs. The porch light was on, the Blue Door stood steady. Chalk sons and stick figure families jumped in the headlights like ghosts, remembering they were just pictures. He slept little. Patted the house. At 2 a.m., floors creaking like a ship. Stopped at a framed photo of his father. Gray jumpsuit, badge, mop, grin. He rested his forehead to the glass. "The truth doesn't ask for our comfort," he whispered. "Only our courage." Dawn came gray and soft. At the courthouse, Nguyen waited with 2 coffees. "We got a ping," she said. "Maddox used his city keycard at a Riverside storage facility at 3 a.m. He's either bold or stupid." "You want a warrant and a judge who signs at speed," Elijah said. "You available?" He amended 2 lines, signed. "Be careful." "We don't do careful," she said. "We do thorough. Also, Cruz is in protective custody. We're moving his family." "He'll hate you a week and love you a lifetime," Elijah said. By noon, a text. "Got it. Files, drives, names. Bigger than we thought." A photo followed, banker boxes stacked like a skyline. On the top box, a label in neat marker. "Syndicate accounts. D." He didn't need a key to know who D was. 12 seconds of victory. Then Kira in the doorway, pale. "IA can't find Doyle. Phone off. City car gone. And someone left this for you." Another envelope, another photo. Their mailbox, flag up, a single word on printer paper inside. "Soon." He set it down gently like something that thinks it's a bomb. Then walked back into 4B to keep calling cases, because the city doesn't pause for threats. It never had. It never would. In the last matter, a public defender argued a case that read like a Kane arrest without the deli camera. Convenient smell, convenient panic, inconvenient skin. Elijah granted the motion. The young man blinked like waking from a hard dream. "Thank you," the defender whispered, knowing it wasn't the right phrase, saying it anyway. The clerk dimmed the lights, straightened the files. Elijah stood, hand on the chair he'd spent a lifetime trying to earn, and felt the city balance for a second, like a coin that could fall either way. He stepped into the hallway, into the hum, into work that would not end tonight or tomorrow. And only then did the building notice that what had begun as a case had become a war, that what had looked like a bad cop had grown teeth and a wallet and a schedule of meetings on the 2nd floor of City Hall, and that what had felt like a slap in a courtroom had landed on a city that suddenly, blessedly, knew how hard it had been hit. They hit the city like weather. Not sirens, those came after, but the click of deadbolts, the whisper of garage doors lifting at hours when decent people were asleep, the breath you take before a hard dive. Across Philadelphia, living rooms lit up in flashes as agents in windbreakers fanned out with neat stacks of warrants and a patience honed in other wars. In Fishtown, a townhome that hosted too many poker games and too few taxes. In Northern Liberties, a contracting office where the copier had worked overtime laundering invoices. In Roxborough, a union annex with a safe that wasn't going to open itself. Nguyen's teams divided, swept, labeled, logged. It wasn't chaos, it was rigor. Elijah watched from the edge of it, the way a surgeon's spouse watches through glass, useless and unblinking, phone in hand. His job tonight was smaller than his robe. Sign, keep, don't miss, don't blink. He worked from his kitchen table while federal agents drank Angela's coffee pot dry and pretended not to notice the chalk rockets on the driveway or the spelling list taped to the fridge. Midnight came. 2 a.m. followed, sticky with fatigue. At 2:11, his phone buzzed. Cars across the street again, headlights off this time. Angela texted from upstairs. He stood so fast his chair skidded. An agent by the door straightened, hand to his radio. Elijah eased the curtain a finger's width. 3 sedans, windows smoked, engines low, no movement. The porch light touched them just enough to make them look like ideas, not cars. He typed back, "Stay upstairs, keep the kids in your room." Nguyen arrived in 8 minutes, hair in a messy knot, vest thrown over a Georgetown hoodie like she'd dressed in the hall. She didn't go for the megaphone. She went for the Walker voice you can hear through glass and fear. "FBI," she shouted. "Turn the cars off. Hands where I can see them. Anyone reaches for anything, we assume you're suicidal." For a beat, nothing. Then doors in the second car swung open. 3 men stepped out, tailored coats, barbered beards, the kind of fit that still screams goon if you know what to look for. The lead man, older, tan, even at night, lifted his hands. "We're just sitting," he said. The smile was a furniture showroom. "Is that illegal now?" "Stalking is," Nguyen said. "Witness intimidation is. Conspiracy is. Want me to keep going? You got a warrant for this sidewalk?" "I have a pair of handcuffs and a very long day," she said. "Leave or ride. Your call." They left. Not fast, not scared, just a long, lazy U-turn, the way you exit a restaurant you plan to burn later. Elijah's palms were damp. He hadn't noticed he was holding the curtain until he let it go, and the fabric whispered a relief he didn't feel. "Get some sleep," Nguyen said softly. "We've got 3 more doors before dawn." "Doyle?" "Ghosting us," she said. "Either he's running or he's busy." "Busy feels right," he said. They didn't find Mateo first. A traffic camera did. Grainy, high angle, North Front Street at 3:02 a.m. 2 men in hoodies stepping out of a van. The quick jerk of a door opening, Mateo yanked inside, a flash of his face turned toward the lens as if to testify to a machine. Elijah saw the still Nguyen sent him and had to sit down. He felt the conviction flood in before the grief. That was how he'd been built, for better and worse. The picture didn't show blood, didn't show a gun, didn't show an end. It showed a beginning. "Plate's stolen," Nguyen said on the phone. "We'll get him." "He's 24, Elijah said. "Younger than the century." "We'll get him," Nguyen repeated. He didn't go back to bed. He drove to the courthouse while the city still debated dawn. The marble steps were damp with mist. The bronze doors were cold. Inside smelled like paper, lemon oil, and a century of arguments. He unlocked the side chamber of 4B. The picture of his father waited. Blue-gray jumpsuit, name patch that said Brooks, mop handle gripped like a sword he'd been taught not to swing. "You cleaned it," Elijah said to the glass. "You kept your head down and cleaned it so people like me could keep our heads up." "I hear you," he whispered. The phone vibrated. "Nguyen, we have intel. Doyle meeting remains at shipyard. Pier 37, 5:30, no lights. We move at 5. He typed, I'm coming. Her reply came in 3 beats. No, you're not. The Delaware wore its gray like armor. The shipyard crouched in the wind, cranes frozen mid-gesture. It wasn't abandoned, just forgotten. Nguyen's convoy cut their lights a block out. 4 heat signatures, she whispered. That's not a meeting, that's a handoff. The breach began quiet, then gunfire. Wild at first, anger, not aim, then controlled. Nguyen shouted orders, voice steady enough to stand on. Inside, a warehouse cold with oil and fear. Banker boxes in triangles. A laptop blinking. And Ray Maddox, zip-tied, face swollen, grinning with what was left of his teeth. Your Honor, he rasped. How's the bench? Less corrupt than your locker, Elijah said. Nguyen pulled him aside. This is a spine, she said. Accounts, drop schedules, 12 years of receipts if they're clean. And Mateo? Leverage gets kept, she said. By dawn's edge, the first arrests rolled. Callaway, Mercer, contractors, treasurers, bagmen. Headlines shrieked, Judge Brooks survives syndicate ambush. FBI raids expose money pipeline. City in shock. Elijah read none of them. He read affidavits. He read ledgers. He read the city's confession. Nguyen found the van. Empty. Oil slick still fresh. A burner phone left charging. Fear's version of a footprint. By 2, a security guard called from Tinicum. I heard a noise, he said. Like a dog. They found Mateo in a loading bay, bound, bruised, alive. You found me, he whispered. Of course we did, Elijah said, and meant it. Gwen's face cracked just enough to let light in. We've got Doyle cornered, she said. He's heading for Port Richmond. They boxed him in between a deli and a vape shop. Doyle raised his hands, spit on the sidewalk, sneered. You think this changes anything, he said. The city's bigger than your little show. I don't believe in you, Nguyen said. I believe in paperwork. The day had the gall to turn beautiful. October light, clean as forgiveness. Elijah made a vow he didn't say out loud. That truth would not go quiet again. The courthouse became a triage ward for justice. Rosa wept when she learned she wouldn't go back to jail for hitting the officer who hit her first. Terrence asked if he could call. His mother because she wouldn't believe him otherwise. A grandmother left cookies on the defense table because she didn't know where else to put gratitude. At dusk, Kira appeared. The mayor's outside, cameras, signs, reporters. Let the mayor talk, Elijah said. I have work. He worked until his eyes burned. When Nguyen returned, she said, This opened doors in other cities. You gave them a stencil. Elijah smiled. I didn't give them anything. The city did. You lit it, she said. On the drive home, Sam Cooke sang through the radio, It's been a long time coming. Elijah sang along, tired and true. At Maple, the blue door waited. You're safe, Angela said. Not because I behaved, he said. Mateo? Alive, hurt, but alive. And you? Tired, he said, and not done. Later, the agents outside swapped shifts, their breath making small clouds that didn't know they were guarding something holy. Elijah looked at his father's picture one more time. The mop shone in lamplight like a scepter that had finally found the head it deserved. We're not done, he whispered. By morning, the ink had dried enough for headlines. Justice won't kneel. There were boxes to open, cases to vacate, officers to fire and to indict, mothers to call, streets to walk with your head up on. Somewhere, Frank Doyle stared at a wall he couldn't finesse and finally felt what he'd made a city feel for too long. The certainty that the old plays weren't going to work anymore. Elijah slept 3 hours, woke with the taste of metal and hope. He tied his tie, kissed Angela at the door. On the steps, he stopped. took one extra breath, because sometimes breathing is the bravest thing. Then he walked back into the courthouse that had tried to break him and hadn't. The day didn't stop to announce it had become history. It just kept going. One motion hearing, one affidavit, one signature at a time, until a week turned into a month, and a month turned into the kind of season you can name. Leaves browned and lifted. The city changed the way most cities change. At the edges first, where the light hits. On a gray Monday that pretended to be ordinary, the families began to arrive earlier than anyone expected, lining the courthouse steps with framed photos and nervous hands. Some wore church clothes, some wore work boots and hoodies. Most carried folders that had followed them like ghosts. Sentencing sheets, letters returned unanswered, pictures of birthdays celebrated in visiting rooms. They stood in clusters and spoke low, as if being loud might summon the bad luck back. Inside, Elijah's courtroom breathed like a crowded train car at rush hour. He took the bench and didn't clear his throat. He didn't need the room quiet. It already was the kind of quiet you feel more than here. He worked through the stack the way you lift weights, slow, with attention, not performing for anyone. Commonwealth vs. Guerrero vacated. Commonwealth vs. Rivers vacated. Commonwealth vs. Richardson vacated. A name that belonged to a boy who never came home, the clerk's eyes shining as the order hit the docket like a small mercy, too late and still necessary. Afterward, in the hallway, a grandmother pressed a tin of butter cookies into his hands with both palms the way you hand someone a baby. "I don't know how to say thank you," she said. "You just did," he told her, and almost smiled when she insisted he take the tin. Word spread, as it always does, without needing anyone to spread it. The convictions didn't topple like dominoes. Nothing important ever does. They fell like trees, one at a time, each with a sound you could feel in your chest. In the first month, 22 people walked out. By Christmas, the number was 86. Some came down those courthouse steps with their kids on their shoulders. Some came down alone, eyes wide as if the air had changed pressure. Some didn't look up at all. Not because they weren't grateful, but because gratitude is a muscle that takes time to remember how to use. Philadelphia did what Philadelphia does. It argued about itself loudly, with love and with the kind of cruelty that sounds like love if you squint. Talk radio called it a purge, then a witch hunt, then a long overdue confession. The mayor made speeches. The union held its own pressers. The pundits buzzed. None of it opened a cell. Paperwork did. People did. Ngwen turned her bullpen of agents into a war room with a map that never slept. Red pins for arrests, yellow for indictments, blue for cooperating witnesses. "Look," she said one morning, tapping a cluster near Erie Avenue. "This isn't a tree, it's a lattice. We didn't cut a trunk, we pulled a thread." And then came the calls from other cities: Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland, Los Angeles. Some from attorneys, some from beat cops whispering from parked cars, some from mothers who had learned a judge's name and refused to let go of it. Assistant Director Crawford visited once, then twice, then often enough that the security guard started calling him DC as if that were a nickname and not a place. Crawford didn't do pep talks. He did promises on paper. "We're setting up a national working group," he told Elijah in chambers over lukewarm coffee. "Shared databases, joint task forces, real teeth. You drag the rot into daylight. We intend to keep it there." "Drag is generous," Elijah said. "The syndicate did most of the dragging. They were noisy at the end." "We're not done," Crawford said, and left without looking for a handshake. Rebecca Lowell kept her office light on later than anyone. She pinned sticky notes to her window so the hallway saw sentences instead of glow. "Review everything. Don't defend the past. People over numbers." When the governor appointed her interim district attorney in February, the union called it a victory for chaos. The public defenders called it a miracle, and her mother called to ask if she needed new suits. She didn't cry then. She cried later, alone, sitting at her desk with a box of old case files like a stack of old sins you pull down and name. She came to Elijah's chambers before the ceremony. "I'm not who I was 6 months ago," she said. "None of us are," he said. "I'm afraid that means I might not be who this office needs," she admitted, young, and something like holy. He shook his head. "That's how you know you're right for it. Keep being afraid of the right things." Mateo healed the way people heal when they weren't built for bullet points. A little, then a lot, then not at all, then all at once. The nightmares came on their own schedule. He worked with a counselor who didn't ask him to be brave, just to be honest. IA offered him a desk until his head felt whole. He laughed, sharp, reflexive, then apologized and said yes. On a March morning cold enough to trick you into believing winter hadn't lost, the police board promoted him 2 ranks in 1 vote. The press framed it as optics. The department called it merit. Elijah didn't call it anything. He just nodded when Mateo stood in his doorway. A kid and a captain at the same time. "You're going to change that unit," Elijah said. "I'm going to try," Mateo replied, "and I'm going to piss off people I grew up wanting to be." "Welcome to adulthood," Elijah said, and they laughed like a window opening. Not everyone clapped. Anonymous emails still came, ugly and creative in equal measure. Threats escalated, ebbed, flared with each new arrest. One night in late February, a box on the Brooks porch, a dead pigeon, a note, "Pay the price." Angela made a face, took a photo for evidence, double-bagged it with the same efficiency she used when the disposal choked, called the number Nguyen had taped to the fridge. "We're fine," she told Elijah later. "They want us rattled. I'm rattled enough without their help." In March, 2 states away, a courtroom tried to turn back the tide. A judge with a jaw like a gavel tried to halt the reviews on procedural grounds. It lasted 48 hours. Attorney General Patricia Ramirez filed a blistering brief, walked into the hearing in heels like weapons, and argued with surgical precision. "Justice has a longer memory than corruption," she said, and went back to work. 6 months after the slap, the plaque was ready. It wasn't a big ceremony. Cameras came, yes, but most of the crowd were custodians and clerks and bailiffs and people who had learned how courts work because they had been forced to. Chief Judge Marion Avery spoke first. She didn't give a speech. She told a story. "I started here as a clerk," she said, palm resting lightly on the bench. "I thought justice was a Latin phrase and a robe. I learned it's a choice you make every day when no one is watching. Today, we watch." A maintenance worker peeled the paper away as carefully as a nurse removing a bandage. The plaque was simple, brushed metal, black letters punched clean. Here, justice refused to kneel. The room didn't clap at first. It breathed. Then someone started, soft and stubborn, and the sound grew until even the dust listened. Elijah touched the plaque with 2 fingers, not as if he owned it, but like you check your pulse. The echo of humiliation didn't hold. This one did. On the steps, a reporter asked what the words meant. He didn't prepare a line. "It means we remember what happened and what we did about it," he said. "It means we don't walk past this bench and forget that people bled for the right to be heard." In April, Washington called. Not a courtesy call. An invitation. The National Integrity Commission, hastily chartered, properly funded, asked Elijah to keynote their first convening. He said yes, knowing he'd hate the suit and the applause he couldn't outrun. The ballroom in D.C. had chandeliers like frozen rain and microphones that made even bad ideas sound round. The room held chiefs with gray hair and new humility, DAs who'd learned to say my office failed, public defenders who'd eaten this meal for decades, pastors, activists, cynics taking notes against their will. Nguyen's card now read Deputy Director. Rebecca sat on the aisle, note cards in her lap for a speech she wasn't giving. Mateo wore a suit that fit and an expression that didn't yet. Chief Judge Avery, who hated travel, came anyway, granite softened by pride. Elijah didn't script past 3 sentences. He spoke like he was talking to Jamal, to Rosa, to his father with the mop like a sword. Justice isn't a flame that lives in a building, he said. It's a million small matches, and everyone's responsible for striking one. We will make mistakes. We will overcorrect and undercorrect. We will be accused of hating police and of hating communities. We will be sued and praised and used. But if we keep our eyes on one thing, human dignity, then when we look back 6 months, 6 years, we'll see fewer names on plaques and more names on diplomas. He laid out what they now called, half joking at first and then not joking at all, the Brooks Doctrine. Cameras that upload to neutral servers no patrol car can unplug. Civilian oversight with subpoena power and budgets mayors can't starve. Pattern audits that treat malfunction as data, not excuse. Federal review with independent counsel for any conviction leaning on tainted officers. Whistleblower protections with teeth. Housing, therapy, a phone line that answers at 3 a.m., training in de-escalation and moral imagination, promotions tied to community trust, not just numbers that look good on a chart. He didn't apologize. He didn't sell it as soft. He sold it as harder, because building trust is a heavy lift. The applause lasted longer than he liked. A chief from Detroit said, "We found our own syndicate. Different name, same math." "Don't burn the house," he answered. "Just the mold." Crawford grinned. "The White House wants 5 minutes," he said. Elijah nodded. He could do 5. He could do 15. He could do the part where symbolism buys paper that turns into orders. That night, back in Philadelphia, the courthouse sat in its lights like a ship in harbor. Elijah pressed his knuckles to the plaque. "Stay true," he whispered. Angela waited by the door, watching him the way you watch someone you've chosen twice. "You ready?" she asked. "Almost," he said. On the steps, a chant drifted from the plaza. Not angry, not smug. Something steadier. "Justice for all. Justice for all." A woman held a sign. "Thank you for seeing me." A kid waved a paper gavel. A man in a suit with a neck tattoo cried without hiding it. They drove home with the windows cracked to let in the sound. The radio DJ couldn't help himself. Sam Cooke again. Elijah hummed, then sang, then stopped, listening to the way Angela filled the chorus, soft and sure, like a promise she'd made before the world knew his name. At Maple, 1 SUV instead of 3. 2 agents on the hood talking softly about nothing, which is how people heal when the work is to watch. Their son came down with a scrapbook. "I added the new letters," he said, eyes bright in a way that hurt and helped at the same time. "You don't know me, Judge Brooks, but my brother came home last week. He watched the Eagles game on our couch and didn't flinch when the doorbell rang. I didn't know that was a thing you could fix. Thank you for fixing it." "It wasn't me," Elijah said. "It was a lot of people." "Yeah," his son said, "but you started it." Upstairs, night settled like a blanket thrown by a gentle hand. He stood at the window, picked out the courthouse by its lights, almost seeing the plaque from here if he wanted to pretend. He whispered one more vow, not because vows change the world, but because they change the person who has to step into it. No kneeling to anything but the truth. Autumn returned, the same leaves, different tree. The commission became a calendar. Meetings turned into manuals, manuals into trainings, trainings into a rookie in Chicago pausing with his hand on his holster, counting to 3, choosing a question instead of a command. They called it the Carter pause as a joke. It stopped being a joke when it stopped a funeral. Back in Philadelphia, the hall outside 4B gathered its layers. Smudges near the handle, scuffs along the baseboard, a new scratch under the plaque nobody owned up to. Custodians buffed and shined and sang bad radio at 4 in the morning the way they always had, the way they always will. A man with a gray beard and a sun-bleached Phillies cap wiped the plaque and nodded to himself like a man who knows what clean looks like after everything. Somewhere upstate, Dylan Kane learned the routine, the count, the chow line, how men respect fear when you don't hide it. He wrote a letter he didn't mail, watched a roof he couldn't touch, dreamed of a courtroom where he wasn't a god and woke with the taste of dust. He watched the news once, then stopped. The story kept happening without him, and that was the hardest part to forgive. In a classroom in West Philadelphia, a teacher slid an article to a kid who liked to argue. "Tell me what you think," she said. He read, he asked questions. He rolled his eyes at something corny, then underlined a sentence about body cameras. This is actually smart." The teacher nodded, made a note to assign Baldwin next week, and to start earlier with civics. On a Tuesday that couldn't decide if it wanted to be rain, Elijah walked to work without an escort for the first time since spring. Not because danger was gone, but because living is risk, and he refused to teach his kids that fear gets to own the calendar. Pete at the entrance saluted sloppy enough to be real. "Judge," he grinned. "My nephew started his first semester. Criminal justice. Says he wants to be a public defender." "That's a promotion," Elijah said, smiling all the way down the hall. He paused at 4B, hand on the door, and listened. Inside, someone was resetting chairs. Paper rustled. A gavel thunked once, lightly, like a heartbeat. He stepped in and breathed the room like oxygen. "Court is in session," he said to no one and to everyone, and the city exhaled with him, steady, unfinished, refusing, still, to kneel. In a world that often forgets what justice sounds like, one man reminded us it's not about revenge. It's about courage, truth, and standing tall when the system tells you to kneel. Judge Elijah Brooks didn't just change a courtroom, he made a nation look in the mirror. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Let it remind someone that integrity still matters. Because every time we choose truth over silence, justice takes one more step forward. Thank you for watching, and for believing that stories like this still matter.